When one arrives in Boone, you pretty quickly feel embraced by the mountains. The same thing happens here at the university. When you are a student here at the College of Business, you're embraced by the Appalachian community.
The name Appalachian State University, it means something and it connects with people. The experience goes beyond academics. There's a culture here. Everywhere I go, I wear that golden A. I take pride in that. It's not something that you find everywhere.
One of the things that's great about Appalachian is it has the resources of a big school, but the small school community.
Professors here take such an important view of how they can impact the lives of students.
That's the reason why we're here, supporting the students, seeing that they're successful both in their time here and then as they graduate.
We have a remarkable connection between faculty and students.
We have some of the leading voices in the field, so it really creates an intellectually vibrant environment.
We have the smaller class sizes, we have the high faculty engagement, and it really sets us apart.
These students are phenomenal. These students are, in my opinion, going to be the change seekers and change makers in the world, not only through their professional skills, but also because of the passion they have got for making this world a better place.
A lot of people think of school as coming to the classroom and then going home and doing homework. At the Walker College, it's not like that.
We're really trying to rethink how we deliver education, what the purpose of education is. Really trying to break that hierarchy of the professor being out in front with all the great ideas and instead saying, you know what, everybody has great ideas.
They're figuring out those solutions through innovative thinking, through an innovative process.
Innovation is the edge. We are trying very hard to push our students to think in ways that they can not only think outside the box, but what kind of positive impacts they will be able to make in the world.
Having these different opportunities really sets our college apart.
We're trying to prepare the leaders of tomorrow by giving them ways of thinking about problems so they come up with solutions that are meaningful.
The students hit the ground running. They are the most technically competent, ready to go day one students. You know, when you get out into the business environment, that's the attitude you have to have.
Hiring an Appalachian graduate, as an employer, I know that I've got someone who can come in and hit the ground running.
One of the phrases you'll hear used often in the College of Business is business for good. We want our students going out in the world and helping to make it better by using business practices that can help.
I'm thankful for the transformational experience that Appalachian has given me. This college has shaped me both as a person and, I think, a servant leader.
Being a Mountaineer and being part of the Walker College of Business has shaped who I am today.
I'm really excited to enter the workforce with the skills that I've gained here.
For me, Appalachian really represents family. You know, I don't know where I would be without my Appalachian experience. I'm proud to be a Mountaineer in so many ways.
Any student that comes out of the Walker College of Business is extraordinarily prepared to be successful and to make a difference in the world.
If you want to be able to work side by side with faculty, students, staff, community, partners, and industry, we want you to be part of our family.
Well, welcome Appalachian family, Walker College of Business family. It's such a delight to have you here with us this afternoon. The afternoon of our 60th program in the Harlan E. Boyles Distinguished Lecture Series. The Walker College of Business is honored to host this event. As a result of this series, students are able to learn from and interact with high-level business executives, both global and domestic. This event is one example of how we are able to achieve our mission to deliver transformational educational experiences that prepare and inspire students to be ethical, innovative, and engaged leaders who positively impact our community, both locally and globally. It is now my pleasure to introduce our platform party, Dr. Darrell Kruger, Appalachian State University Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor, Mr. Edward Boyles, Managing Director of Wells Fargo Securities and a valued member of the Walker College of Business Advisory Council. Mr. Boyles and his family have been instrumental in the Harlan E. Boyles Distinguished Lecture Series, which began in the spring of 1988. This series speaks to industry, hard work, and integrity required in today's business world, both global and domestic. Mr. Brad Sparks, Executive Director of Global Corporate Citizenship at KPMG. Mr. Sparks received an MBA with a focus in sustainable enterprise from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as well as a Master of Science and BSBA in accounting from Appalachian State University. And he lives in Los Angeles now, serves on the board of Grid Alternatives, a nonprofit enterprise that brings renewable energy technology and job training to underserved communities. And last but not least, today's featured speaker, Lord Dr. Michael Hastings, Global Head of Corporate Citizenship, KPMG International, whom Brad will introduce in just a few moments. A special thanks to KPMG for allowing us to have this opportunity. And Brad, thank you so much for the introduction. It's been a fantastic evening last night and day with you today, and I'll treasure it always. I'll now invite Provost Kruger to bring greetings.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dean Norris. It is my pleasure to join you for the 60th lecture in this important series. I'd like to express my thanks to the business leaders, faculty, staff, students, and special guests who are in attendance today. We are honored that you have chosen to be here on the campus of Appalachian State University. Your commitment to Appalachian is important to us and very much appreciated. As Dean Norris mentioned, hearing from and engaging with business leaders helps to prepare our students for their future endeavors. Today's speaker, Lord Dr. Michael Hastings, has a very provocative lecture title. I look forward to hearing more about his billion-dollar opportunity, and I know we will all benefit from hearing him speak. Thank you, Lord Hastings, for taking time out of your busy schedule to share some of your experiences and valuable insight with us today. Now I would like to ask Mr. Brad Sparks, Executive Director, Global Corporate Citizenship, KPMG, to introduce our featured speaker. As Executive Director, Mr. Sparks focuses on integrating corporate responsibility across the KPMG network by developing corporate global citizenship strategies, representing KPMG at global sustainability events, and reporting progress to KPMG leadership. He also works closely with KPMG's Global Sustainability Services and serves as the liaison to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Please join me in a warm welcome for Brad Sparks.
All right, well, thank you, and I must say it's truly great to be back in Boone and back at Appalachian State. When I was here 20 years ago, Appalachian gave me a lot, and one of the most meaningful things that Appalachian gave me was really a recognition and appreciation for thinking about the world beyond the borders of North Carolina. And I can't think of anyone who better represents what it means to think with a global perspective than the individual we have today here with us to speak, Lord Dr. Michael Hastings. Michael came to KPMG in 2006 after a career with the BBC, and first before that as a teacher. When he came to KPMG, he was tasked with the challenge of getting our organization to think more about how business can be a force for good for the world and for societal interest at large. And since then, he's been instrumental in bringing the private sector to think about the things they can do to advance sustainable development and representing KPMG at a number of different world business sustainability organizations. Michael has done a great job at also inspiring people around the world at KPMG and beyond to think about their own individual contributions. And with my short introduction today, I want to turn it over to him, but say to each of you that I hope you will think as he speaks about what you can do individually to help advance your own community here in Boone today, to help the U.S. tomorrow, and to help the world beyond in the years ahead. So please join me in welcoming to Appalachian State University, Lord Michael Hastings.
Well, very good afternoon to all of you, and many of you may not be used to a British voice. It may help you to remember that the language you speak was one you borrowed, and we'd be very keen to teach you how to get the elocution right. I'm thrilled to be here at Appalachian State University. This is a stunning setting, and I'm sure you all appreciate the beauty of the surroundings around you, but also the power of the innovation within the university and the teaching you receive. And I was particularly thrilled to note that it was the Appalachian State Solar Vehicle which won the race, well, second place in 2017. Second place were, of course, in reality, but for a hiccup, it would have been the first, and it is an honor to be in your company. So thank you for your time this afternoon. I spent last weekend in Dubai, and when I was in Dubai at the Global Education Summit, I met three remarkable young people. I met Lewis Mizzen, Susanna Barner, and Kevin Trejos. Those three had come from Parkland School in Florida. They came to Dubai at the invitation of the Global Education and Skills Summit in order to raise the reality of the issues that the country is facing, and in reality too, many communities in the world are facing around gun control. Tomorrow, the estimate is that 500,000 to 1 million young people, school-age young people, will march for their lives in Washington, D.C. And as of a few minutes ago, 832 other communities in the US and around the world, including London and Tokyo and Seoul and Paris, will all hold marches to say never again. It's incredibly important to remember, especially in a country with 4.4% of the world's population and 42% of the world's guns, that sometimes when you're faced with the reality of a harsh and conflicting issue, you may need to change. That's one of the big events of tomorrow. The other big event tomorrow is Earth Day. Earth Day has become a regular part of the clock of recognition in the sustainability world. Earth Day is the opportunity at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, Eastern Standard Time, to turn off the lights. It's the chance all across the world for businesses and governments and citizens and individuals to at long last say, there is something, even just a small thing, that I need to do to mark the significance of the environmental crisis we face. So I've come from a part of Europe in the United Kingdom, where here we are in the middle of March, experiencing snow blizzards. It's the first time in recorded history that we've had snow blizzards in mid to late March, and more is predicted next week. And similarly, in the north coast, or rather the northern coast of the east coast of the US, the same is happening. Last summer, there were unbelievably dramatic impacts as a result of sea warming and the hurricanes and the floods that followed, as well as the severe flooding that took place in Bangladesh. This is the moment at which our world is saying, when you see the facts, there is a need to change. This is the sustainability moment we didn't want. This is the occasion we thought we could possibly begin to avoid, but it's not so good. Now, there is one piece of good news, one small piece of good news. In my pursuit to find innovations that might be acceptable ways of thinking about a better future, and after all, in context, our world is actually a better place than it was when I was a child, and when my parents were around, and when my grandparents were around. This is a more balanced world than we've ever had before. Better health care, less poverty, more opportunity, great innovation, fantastic commercial progress. But even with all of the progress that we've witnessed, we still are struggling to make time for one another and to give one another the dignity of a long future. But here's one piece of good news. If you are a cow, and I don't see any in the room, but we'll hear them if there is hope on the horizon. You probably know that 1/7 of all man-made global greenhouse gas emissions come from the cow. 90% comes by burps, and I can imagine you can think where the other 10% comes from. Well, as a result of applying seaweed technologies, guess what? Seaweed fed to cows reduces the burping and the other end by 20%. So now that cows get the opportunity to chew a new kind of green, there is some hope for our future. But it's serious. Agricultural emissions are a massive part of the problem of restraining climate change. Yesterday, I was reading in the Times newspaper in London as I boarded my flight about the impacts that last summer's floods, last summer's hurricanes, and last summer's almost tsunami-style impacts were having across the world on the insurance industry. Lloyd's of London was established way back in 1688. That's even before the United States became the United States. It is the world's largest and oldest insurance market. Its history recognizes the way in which those with wealth have contributed to support those at times of disaster and needed it most. Well, last year, as a result of the devastation, the impacts of hurricanes, fires, and floods, the Lloyd's market has gone into deficit. The loss, $7.7 billion, of course, across the last year, and in total, world insurance payments in the last 12 months running at $140 billion, directly related to climate impacts. You see, when the facts begin to say you need to think differently, you need to change. A book was published just 2 weeks ago called The Water Will Come. The book was written by Jeff Goodall. Jeff Goodall is a well-known international traveler and analyst. And in the review of the book, I found some things quite revealing. He talks about the faster than expected melting of the ice sheets at the top and the bottom of the world, suggesting that we cannot easily dismiss predictions that global sea levels could rise 9 feet by 2100. If you are already in Miami, you know what water in the streets literally means. And this, he says, in a world where 145 million people live within 3 feet of a sea level. The book goes on further to predict that should we not attack the pressures of climate change on our environment and the way in which we feel it in the catastrophes that we've witnessed, then we will see the climate impact of 200 million more migrants forced out of their living environments into insecure housing or no housing in order to survive the irresponsibility of the mass. Now, I've always been taken by the challenge of other planets, aren't we all? It was 1961 when I was but a young child, and yes, I do remember it. May the 25th, when a previous US President, John Kennedy, made a dramatic announcement to Congress. He announced that it was the will of the US that a man should be put on the moon. A year later, in September the 12th, 1962, President Kennedy delivered a speech at Rice University in the football stadium, one of the most memorable speeches of any president ever delivered. And I want to read you just a few of the words of what President Kennedy said on that day. He said then that we set sail for a new sea, because there is new knowledge to be gained, new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. For space science, like nuclear science, for all technology, has no conscience on its own. In other words, the president was saying, if we make an advance in one direction, we do so for all the people of the world. And we do so because of the willing conscience of those who know what the right is. Then he goes on to say, why take this challenge? Why go to the moon? Why climb the highest mountains? We choose to go to the moon in this decade, and we choose to do other things, said President Kennedy, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and to measure the very best of our energies and our skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one that we're not willing to postpone, one that we intend to win. The three young people that I met and had time with in Dubai from Florida last week told me it is their determination to win the argument. Wherever you sit on the right side or the wrong side of the case, you can't dispute their enthusiasm, their energy, and their purposefulness. Many of us will wish them well tomorrow and in the months to come. Those 832 marches across the US and around the world could finally bring the seismic difference that many have longed for. No more deaths in school. And at Earth Hour tomorrow, maybe the world, conscious of the costs, will sit up and say, on the same day, it's not just an hour that requires me to change. It is a lifestyle that I need to change. It are habits, thinking, and pursuits, and processes that I've adopted with ease that I must, at long last, transform. For me, one of the biggest drivers in my life, let alone in anyone else's life, is what purpose do I attach to my days? What value do I attribute to the hours that I pass? For you, for the learning that you receive, for every input of intellect, every aspiration shared, every inspiration gained. What am I to do with it? Well, in a country in which your constitution says that for you to be happy as Americans is part of your well-being and your right to life, I want to quote an American philosopher, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, the purpose of life is not to be happy, is not to be happy. It is to be useful. It is to be honorable. It is to be compassionate. It is to have it make some meaningful difference that you have lived and lived well. Well, people have begun to think about the role of purpose as being distinct from just morality or ideas or even philosophy. I'm showing you an edition of the magazine, The New Scientist. The New Scientist heads its front page a year ago, The Meaning of Life. Now, never before did we expect a scientific journal to be, a scientific journal to define meaning in such a way that they would attribute to it not just its front page, but of course, a major edition. I can cope with it, it's fine. Obviously, investment needed in this particular area. I'm sure the proceeds of this lecture will go towards it. The New Scientist, when it raises the question, why am I here? A question every young person asks, every student considers, goes on to say that all of us need to identify the something we want to live for. What is the simple idea, the heart of a great ambition? What is the driving force that will transform us? What is the compelling philosophy that will make us do what Kennedy said are the hard things in life? The hard choices, not the easy choices. It's easy to think that sustainability is simply about cutting waste. No, Sustainability is absolutely about changing my behaviors. It is about transforming my approaches. It is about thinking beyond what I gain from my material opportunities to the world that I must have beyond me. The New Scientist, which thinks about things scientifically and analytically, then says this: the notion of purpose in life may seem ill-defined and even unscientific, but a growing heap of research is pinning down what it is and how it affects our lives. People who have a greater sense of purpose live longer, sleep better, and have better sex. Purpose cuts the rise of strokes and depression. It helps people recover from addiction or manage their glucose levels if they're diabetics. If a pharmaceutical company could possibly bottle such a treatment, it would make billions. But you can find it on your own, and it is free. So when we think about the complex challenges of the world around us, we must think about identifying our purpose, because without that, we'll simply view the marching of the millions or the irritations of the sea levels as somebody else's problem, never our own. And the vital need to remember is that once a purpose within us is found and defined, it can so completely and radically translate into physical environments of value, let alone ideological changes in our own lives. I was taken with a small story whose film I'm about to show you. It's just a 1-minute clip, but here is the story of a remarkable man at the age of 17. Javed was living on an island state to the northeast of India. Part of India's wider geo-reach, Javed noticed that as a result of sea pollution, the island state had lost its natural vegetation and its animals had died away. He decided in 1979 that he would plant a tree every day for the rest of his life. Here's his story.
Etu apuna etu 79 tar etu apuna etu 79 tar starting question tar agote etu postu date loisil etia photapot koibo pora ব্যবস্থাটো আছে ইয়াত যেটো গুটি সংগটো ইয়াৰ পৰা লব পাৰি এটো যে 550 হেক্টৰ যে আছে বুলি কৈছো এটো গছ গছনিয়ে এতিয়া সেইখন হাবিত অতব্য অৰণ্য হোৱা কাৰণে 15টা হাতী তাতে 3 মাহ দিন থাকে আৰু সেইদৰে গড় থাকে যিকিদিন থাকিমে গছকে ৰুম আৰু এবোৰ ফিলআপ কৰিব যোৱা ডিস্ট্ৰিক্টটো যদি ফিলআপ কৰিব পাৰো তা কোনবা কাটিবলে মুকে কাটেৰো এবোৰ কাটিলে কি লাভ আছে প্ৰতিবাদমুখী হলেও মই মানে বুজা দিও গছেটো ঘৰ ভাঙিব নাযায়
"37 years, every single day, on his knees, planting a tree. The result, a recovered community, bigger than Central Park. The wildlife returned. The rhinos were back in place. The snakes took their place. The trees recovered. The natural environment was restored. The duty to be a sustainable leader rests with an individual. It is easy to press these things to governments, to push them off to complicated systems. The decision to hold a gun rests with an individual. The decision to plant a tree rests with an individual. The duty to live our purpose rests with an individual. All of us need to know whether or not to these issues we are indifferent or inclined, enthusiastic or careless. I was taken with reading the story of Elie Wiesel. He was born on the 30th of September 1928 in Sighet in Romania, the son of a traditional Jewish family. His family was sent to the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp system in 1944 where he endured with his father slave labor, starvation, and beatings. He was transferred to Birkenwell camp, where he was liberated by US forces in April 1945. He published several renowned books, Holocaust memoirs called Night in 1958, and became a US citizen in 1963, and received multiple global awards, including the Congressional Gold Medal and the Freedom and Nobel Peace Prize medals in 1986. In a remarkable speech in the White House, he talked about the perils of indifference. And I want to read you just a small part of his reflections in front of the then President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton. This was on the 12th of April, 1999. We are, he said then, on the threshold of a new century, a new millennium. What will the legacy of this vanishing century be? How will it be remembered in the new millennium? Surely it's going to be judged, and judged severely in both moral and metaphysical terms. These failures have cast a dark shadow over humanity. 2 world wars, countless civil wars, the senseless chain of assassinations from Gandhi, the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, Sadat, Rabin, bloodbaths in Cambodia and Nigeria, India and Pakistan, Ireland and Rwanda, Eritrea and Ethiopia, Sarajevo and Kosovo, the inhumanity in the Gulag and the tragedy of Hiroshima, and on a different level, of course, Auschwitz and Treblinka. So much violence, so much indifference. What is indifference? Asks Wiesel. Etymologically, the word means no difference. A strange and unnatural state in which the lines blur between light and darkness, dusk and dawn, crime and punishment, cruelty and compassion, good and evil. What are its causes and inescapable consequences? Indifference is to be tempted, to be seduced, to be disengaged. It is easier to look away from anyone who is a victim. Indifference, he says, after all, is more dangerous than anger and hatred. Anger can at times be creative, or to write a great poem, a great symphony, to do something special for the sake of humanity because you are angry. But indifference has only one witness. Indifference is not the beginning, it is the end of us. And therefore, indifference is to be a friend of the enemy, to benefit the aggressor, never the victim, always to fight only for the last loss in life. So my challenge to you today, as we wait on the outcomes of tomorrow's events, is to ask yourselves as students whether or not you are, in effect, purposeful or indifferent, whether you measure the value of the lives of those who will march or the transformation of those who will switch off the lights, or whether when it gets to 8 o'clock you're inclined not to bother, or when you see the energy of those on the streets to think, it's pointless. An interesting article appeared in the Financial Times in London just 2 days ago. It was headed uncomfortably, Millennials, not quite so special. Millennials, of course, are all of you who fall into the category of the essentially 18s to 30s. An uncomfortable phrase in the course of the assessment written by a leading historian. Millennials consider themselves entitled. They're self-obsessed, job hoppers, desperate for a life outside of work, looking for purpose, and constantly wanting feedback. The answer, says the article, is to discern the purpose, decide the outcome, fight with all your energy and all you have to achieve the equality of a more commonwealth and common world. I was challenged also by an article written by Professor Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University in 2008, just at the beginning of the global financial crisis. As he began to explore the ideas that had driven us to the place where we were facing banking breakdown and uncertainty and degradation in the environment, insecurity in our wider world when we believed the new millennium, which Wiesel looked forward to, was going to give us great peace, when there were pandemics of disease and growing terrorism, how were we going to respond in the light of that? What was going to be the one thing that would change us so that we never repeated the uncomfortable histories that we so dislike. In a critical assessment written in Time magazine under the headline Commonwealth, Professor Sachs says these words: "That is why the single greatest idea to change the world is simply this: overcoming cynicism." Overcoming cynicism. You see, at the end of the day, faced with the discomfort of a world that works wonderfully for many and doesn't function at all for multitudes, faced with the distorted challenges of violence, whether in the schools or between countries that can't agree, faced with the problems of rising sea temperatures and the massive costs of what ought to be a low-energy world, instead having to pay out on insurance, but faced too with the opportunity of innovation, of embracing the skills of the future, of taking on board the low-carbon chance and deciding that our choices are going to be choices for the world beyond us. Faced with all of that, will we be people of cynicism or people of purpose? Will we hold on to a value that allows us to rise beyond the immediate gain of our degree? Will we turn ourselves outward, way beyond the glories of this place? Will we become fighters for the values we hold dearly, or just merely operators in the wider economic system? I close with a quote. General Douglas MacArthur is well known for the great fight that he took of the American people to rescue Europe at the time of the Second World War. A man whose record in military service and subsequently in political life is widely recognized. He has a reflection on the time of youth, and I find it completely compelling. So let me share it with you. Youth, he says, and I speak to the students, and maybe the hopeful faculty who want to remain young, youth, he said, is not a period of time. It is not your age. It is a state of mind. It is a result of the will. It is a quality of the imagination, a victory of courage over timidity, of the taste for adventure over the love of comfort. A man or a woman doesn't grow old because you've lived a certain number of years. A man or woman grows old when you desert your ideals. The years may wrinkle your skin, but deserting your ideals wrinkles your soul. Preoccupations, fears, doubts, despair, and indifference are the enemies which slowly bow us towards earth and turn us into dust before death. If one day, says MacArthur, if one day you who are young should become bitter, pessimistic, and gnawed by despair, may God have mercy on your old man's soul. Thank you for listening.
Well, I think we would all agree that Lord Hastings has a very smooth soul. No wrinkles there, for sure. Thank you so much for your inspiring words and truly demonstrating how to live a life with purpose. I hope that everyone got out of Lord Hastings' comments as much as I did and is able to take what he has given us and apply it every day of your life. So we have a few questions for you from a poll that we did with our students. So if you are willing to come back up and address those, I'll kind of stand off here and read them to you. Maybe borrowing the mic for just a moment. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can share. That's a good
All
thing.
right. So we polled our students to find out what questions they would most like to ask Lord Hastings. And so here are the two that we've chosen for today. The first question comes from Matt Appleby. And Matt, you want to just, there he is,
There
right
he is.
there. He is a finance and banking major, and his question is, artificial intelligence is becoming a leading topic in today's conversation, with many people viewing it as a potential hazard to the future of mankind. However, companies like IBM and Microsoft are pioneers in AI technology. What is the World Economic Forum's viewpoint on AI?
Well, I refer you to a very important article written by Professor Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and managing director of the World Economic Forum. He founded the WEF way back in 1973 and has continued to lead it as an institution and a key organization for both business and political thinkers to gather every year. The article was written a year ago, and you'll find it on the World Economic Forum website. He talks about the fourth industrial revolution, the age of robotics and artificial intelligence. And in there, he concludes with a very apposite summary, which is simply this, that we may beguile ourselves into believing that technology will render us a restful future generation, will take from us the most awkward burdens that all of us battle with, the kind of work we don't want to do, the things we wish were just automated and beyond our necessity to engage with. But the biggest challenge, he said, is for all of us to learn how to relate to one another, because that is the real issue that confronts our world on a daily basis. And human poor relationships, the bad relationships between countries, communities, between the rich and the poor, between the enabled and the disabled, between those who have and those who don't, between those who are criminal and those who want to live fearlessly. Those poor relationships, he said, cannot be solved or attacked by technology. They sometimes are not even necessarily aided by it. So I think the World Economic Forum's thinking would be, we must embrace what AI represents, and we must seek to apply it as best we possibly can. But just in a way like, as you might have seen, the death of Stephen Hawking in the course of the last week, who during a major lecture at the end of last year that was called the Reith Lectures on the BBC, said, interestingly, that the human condition was so fragile that most of us spend our time avoiding situations that we wish we didn't have to deal with, or people we cannot engage with. He actually then went on to predict that we needed a second planet in which to place those we don't like, so that we can find a planet where we can live with those we can get on with. In summary, what his essence saying was, unless we solve the human relationship dynamic at the core of all of our technology, AI will only be an added blip in the future.
And I would say the second question comes from a student as well. It's Dr. Rajat Penwar, but we're all lifelong learners, so he's a student along with us. The next question is, do you think the so-called business case for sustainability is so straightforward that a company's good deeds will always be rewarded? If not, what is the best way to engage companies that do not see a business case for sustainability?
Well, who asked the question? Where are they? Rajat. So I'd refer you, Rajat, I'm sure you know it, but your students as well, to look at the letter delivered by Larry Fink, the chief executive of BlackRock, in the third week of January of this year. And it's worth noting that Larry Fink and BlackRock sit on asset investments greater than the economy of the United Kingdom and collectively greater than the whole economy of the 54 countries of Africa, although slightly less than the size of the US economy. And the opportunity contained in that letter is to address three key things. To have companies in which BlackRock will invest that are genuinely inclusive and deal with all aspects of diversity with the full integrity of a meaningful disposition rather than tick box exercise. Secondly, that companies BlackRock will invest in have to be environmentally sustainable with active processes to show how they're positively contributing to the world beyond themselves, genuinely enhancing the natural environment. And thirdly, companies must be purposeful, must have a social purpose that defines their role and their remit outside of whatever their shareholders consider or their investors require. So I think the movement of asset resources towards both sustainability, environmental duty, purposefulness, and the inclusion of all people of difference of whatever nature you care to find it, to make a more just and fair world, is sitting at the hands of the investors as well as the prompt of the government organizations. I feel that's, hence as I said in my remarks, we are in a more optimistic period of our history than we've ever been. But we face some uncomfortable difficult challenges that will not be met just by their optimism, but will only be met ultimately by ceasing to be indifferent.
Well, thank you. And I would ask Edward if you would come up now. We do have a presentation, and don't go just yet. This is for you. And so, as is the tradition, we have the eagle, the symbol of the Boyles lecture series, the American eagle, which symbolizes strength, gracefulness, keenness of vision, and power of flight. And Lord Hastings, you certainly do demonstrate these qualities in all that you do. And we're so honored to have had just a brief amount of time to spend with you here, and hope that you will take this and remember your time here and the seeds that you've planted for us to water and grow. So we are so pleased to present this crystal to you in our appreciation. So I have just a few closing remarks. First, thanks for the students, faculty, staff, special guests for attending today's lecture. We hope you enjoyed it. And as much as I did, I hope you're inspired by it to go out into the world and be purposeful and engaged and positively impact our community. Please join us for a reception behind the stage by proceeding to the floor of the Convocation Center in just a minute. But first, students, don't forget to have your IDs scanned on the floor over to my right, your left, I believe. You can get those IDs scanned for your attendance purposes. And in case you missed it before the lecture, we're going to replay our college video, again, as you transition from here to the reception platform party. If you would hold for just a few more moments so we can get some photos, and then we'll move on to our reception. Thank you again from Appalachian State University and the Walker College of Business, and have a purpose-driven day and life. Thank you.
When one arrives in Boone, you pretty quickly feel embraced by the mountains. The same thing happens here at the university. When you are a student here at the College of Business, you're embraced by the Appalachian community.
The name Appalachian State University, it means something, and it connects with people. The experience goes beyond academics. There's a culture here. Everywhere I go, I wear that golden A. I take pride in that. It's not something that you find everywhere.
One of the things that's great about Appalachian is it has the resources of a big school, but the small school community.
Professors here take such an important view of how they can impact the lives of students.
That's the reason why we're here, supporting the students, seeing that they're successful both in their time here and then as they graduate.
We have a remarkable connection between faculty and students.
We have some of the leading voices in the field, so it really creates an intellectually vibrant environment.
We have the smaller class sizes, we have the high faculty engagement, and it really sets us apart.
These students are phenomenal. These students are, in my opinion, going to be the change seekers and change makers in the world, not only through their professional skills, but also because of the passion they have got for making this world a better place.
A lot of people think of school as coming to the classroom and then going home and doing homework. At the Walker College, it's not like that.
We're really trying to rethink how we deliver education, what the purpose of education is. Really trying to break that hierarchy of the professor being out in front with all the great ideas and instead saying, you know what, everybody has great ideas.
They're figuring out those solutions through innovative thinking, through an innovative process.
Innovation is the edge. We are trying very hard to push our students to think in ways that they can not only think outside the box, but what kind of positive impact they will be able to make in the world.
Having these different opportunities really sets our college apart.
We're trying to prepare the leaders of tomorrow by giving them ways of thinking about problems so they come up with solutions that are meaningful.
The students hit the ground running. They are the most technically competent, ready to go day one students. You know, when you get out into the business environment, that's the attitude you have to have.
Hiring an Appalachian graduate, as an employer, I know that I've got someone who can come in and hit the ground running.
One of the phrases you'll hear used often in the College of Business is business for good. We want our students going out in the world and helping to make it better by using business practices that can help.
I'm thankful for the transformational experience that Appalachian has given me. This college has shaped me both as a person and, I think, a servant leader.
Being a Mountaineer and being part of the Walker College of Business has shaped who I am today.
I'm really excited to enter the workforce with the skills that I've gained here.
For me, Appalachian really represents family. You know, I don't know where I would be without my Appalachian experience. I'm proud to be a Mountaineer in so many ways.
Any student that comes out of the Walker College of Business is extraordinarily prepared to be successful and to make a difference in the world.
If you want to be able to work side by side with faculty, students, staff, community, partners, and industry, we want you to be part of our family.